Playing Lockdown Defender in NBA 2K26 isn't for the faint of heart, but if you're willing to take on the challenge, these tips will help get you more stops and play lockdown like a pro. Whether you play a true lock build or if you just want to become a better defender, this video is for you. What's up, y'all? It's your boy DJ Vegas from NBA 2K Film Room, and we're gonna try and keep this very efficient while packing in as much information as possible. In this video, we're gonna cover perimeter defense and everything that goes along with it. We're gonna go into a little bit of pressing, interior defense, reading the floor, in-game communication, as well as mindset and mentality. So we're gonna pack a lot of information here. If you need to come back, you can pause the video, come back, but we'll make sure we throw chapters in here. So if you wanna be able to skip around, however, I recommend that you watch this entire video because there's a lot of information that we will be dropping. These are pro level gems here. For the sake of time and to be able to get this video out to you all as soon as possible, I'm just gonna throw a lot of B-roll on top of it as far as clips go. However, the plan is to break down each section into their own videos with full in-depth breakdowns, descriptions, examples, everything that you know we do on 2KFR. So if there's something you want us to talk about more in depth, please let us know in the comments. If you want us to break down anything deeper and more in depth, please let us know in the comments. To start this off, we'll keep it short on builds. If you want a full lockdown build breakdown, we'll link a card above for a dedicated video that will drop in the future. Quick things: on-ball menace, a movable enforcer, high-flying denier, paint patroller, amongst, pick dodger, stuff like that, all matter. You want to have these badges at least at a silver level. If you're a lock, you definitely want to have these at Hall of Fame, if not legend. As many as possible, it's going to help. So you definitely want to have a high speed, high agility, high block, high perimeter. All of that matters. Yeah, steal kind of matters in some capacity, but you definitely want to have that. I also recommend having a good amount of interior, and I'll kind of get into a little bit why later, but there's different ways to play lock depending on your defensive scheme. So it's really up to you and your team, or just you yourself, if you're just running by yourself, on how you want to be and what kind of lock you want to play. So settings wise, you're going to go to your My Career settings. You're going to go to vibration trigger effects. It's a personal choice, but I like to turn them off, not only to avoid distractions of my controller shaking nonstop, but also to have a little bit more control over my triggers, especially if I play on the PlayStation side. With the haptic feedback, your controls and your triggers lock up. So instead of having the ability of being able to tap, they'll kind of lock up. So that's why I kind of like to be able to turn off the vibration trigger effects. Up next, we have pro stick defense. You want to have this on absolute. Personal preference, but I believe absolute builds muscle memory and it makes your reactions faster because they will always be the same no matter where you are on the floor. Where camera relative is kind of like the name, it's going to switch depending on where you are on the floor. It just makes it a lot easier to be able to play defense. Up next, who to guard. You want to make sure your who to guard is always on. Your who to guard arrow is always still going to be there because if you're watching your player, they're always going to still be shaded towards somebody. So instead of you being able to see exactly who you're guarding and who you're shading, you're going to be wondering why you're not getting the contest that you need because your arrow is all the way on somebody else when you're supposed to be here. Especially this year when you're switching back and forth from trapper settings to zone settings, you definitely want to be able to know what setting that you're in. So I definitely recommend having this on. It's super easy to be able to switch your arrows. Up next, and honestly, this is one of the most important ones, if not the most important out of all of these, is your shading indicator. You want to make sure that this is on. So if you notice here, it pops up when you're in range of a ball handler. So green means that they're wide open. Red shows that you're in position to contest. It also shows where on the ball handler that you are. So if you're in like a side zone, if you're in the middle, if you're on the other side, whatever side you're on, it shows you so you can also get a better idea of where your contest is. Also, it's going to give you an idea of your jump radius. The further you are out, if it's not flashing green, you're not going to get a contest whatsoever, no matter what kind of jump you get. However, if it's in the green zone, if you make sure you time your jump, you will get some sort of contest. If you see that popping up on your matchup's feet, you know that you're in range to still be able to jump and get a contest. And that's something that is key to know as a lockdown defender. Also, another thing that matters about the shading indicator is if you notice this year in 2K26, your player automatically gets into a defensive stance. You don't have to tap L2 to be able to do it this year, as long as you're within the range of that shading indicator. If you notice, the further I go out, I start to just move back. It's like, kind of in like just a regular position. I'm just less of a threat. So if they're dribbling past me, I'm less likely to get a bump compared to when I am up front. If they're trying to dribble past me, I'm just using left stick here and I'm getting a bump. That's exactly what you want to have. However, if you're back and you want to be able to adjust yourself, I still recommend tapping L2, but we'll kind of get into that a little bit more. But you definitely want to make sure that you have the shading indicator on. Up next, boost and Gatorade. I know people think that boosts are pointless. That's not true. I'm gonna be completely realistic. Boost actually give you a buff on both sides of the green window. And just like with shooting, just like as you can see now with rebounding, steals still have a green window. It's that same old mechanic that you had in past 2Ks. It's just hidden a little bit more in the game. It's just a timing green window where you have to be able to go for the steal. It's the same sort of thing. It's just a sweet spot where if you press it at the right time, you're going to be rewarded with the steal, aka a green window. So by having boost to your block ratings, boost to your steal ratings, it's going to give you a little bit more of a buffer. So if you go for a steal late, you still have an opportunity to be rewarded, which as a lock, especially in 2K26 with how difficult it is to be able to get on ball steals by pressing the button, you need all the help you can get. So boosts are definitely a huge help. Up next, Gatorade. Gatorade is essential. I also recommend doing all of your workouts. You want to make sure you have workout warrior going. This way you have the maximum amount of stamina, not only so you can be able to keep up with chasing these super fast guards all over the place, but also so you still have enough stamina to be able to sprint back if you need to, be able to get leaping contest. You want to make sure you have as much turbo as possible, and this is a great way of doing it. All right, moving on. Most are already familiar with this. Defensive adrenaline is very similar to offensive adrenaline. You have 3 bars, the same as offense, and every reach and block that you do during a possession, it will consume a bar. And for each bar you lose, you're actually losing attribute ratings in categories like steal and block, which is huge. AKA, if you have 0, you're gonna be much slower, you're gonna get crappier animations, you're gonna be much weaker and less likely to get a contest overall. Yes, if you have higher steal ratings or higher certain ratings, it will decrease it to a certain point. I believe up until last year, I think it only reduced it up into about 25 attribute ratings. There's nothing confirmed this year, but the game still plays on that same sort of foundational idea. So keep that in mind. Every single time you press that button, you are losing adrenaline. So you want to make sure you are very smart with your chances. Each possession is situational. So you want to use the IQ and experience that you gather as a lock to be able to take this possession by possession. Another thing that actually just came to mind is takeovers. Custom takeovers are a fantastic addition to this game. You can be able to do whatever you want. You have glue, which is going to give you body ups and help you with on-ball steals. You can increase your perimeter, you can increase whatever. However, I like running takeovers like Jet and Speedster, especially Speedster, which is going to give me a +8 to my speed and agility. It's huge when it comes to playing lock. It allows me to be able to play on bigger lockdown builds such as a 6'7" and 6'8", and I don't have to worry about having an 85 agility. It allows me to be able to keep up with a lot of these faster guards due to having that takeover. You can run other ones, especially if you're on like a 6'6" and below, where you can be a lot faster and have a lot more agility, but it really just depends on how you make your lockdown build. I also love the hydration hero ability because now when I have that, I can be way more aggressive when going for reaches, when going for a contest, when spamming square off ball, when just running around, because I don't have to worry about stamina drain or losing adrenaline. So it really is a lock stream in a lot of ways, but takeover is really up to you. Okay, now that we have the foundational pieces done, we're going to get into the real parts about being a true lockdown defender in NBA 2K26. Starting with movement, and it's changed a good amount this year. Using your left stick, especially when you're still in the green zone of your shading window, is all you'll need. It'll automatically give you a bump. You'll see on-ball menace and movable enforcer, badges like that pop up, even contest at times. It will still give you that auto contest in good places. So you can rely on just utilizing that left stick. However, you can shift your body so you can either put yourself out of position for a play, or you're going to reduce the amount of space that you cover, so you might not be able to get a bump as much. So just keep that in mind. When you're outside of the hit zone, you need to press L2 to center your player. This way, especially if you're playing like in more of a zone setting, stuff like that in Pro-Am, it'll just be able to center your player so you're always facing the ball. It's going to help you be able to get those lanes. A lot of times in lower difficulty modes, such as like Park, Rec, etc., even in Proving Grounds, due to the arrows that are turning you to somebody, you might be perfectly in the lane, you try and go for a steal. A lot of times you'll get a tip pass animation instead of actually ripping the ball out of the air. And a lot of that is due to positioning from the arrows. So when you're in a zone setting, so being able to tap L2 to be able to center your player, so it just makes it a lot easier to be able to face the ball handler, as well as increase the amount of space you take up. When it comes to using L2, you mainly want to tap the L2 button to recenter your player. You don't want to over rely on it. Holding L2, or even just holding it just a tad bit too long, is going to ground your player, so that kind of stuck in mud feeling, which you're going to get a lot of blow bys, especially this year with lightning launch and how fast guards are. You don't don't want to be stuck in mud. You don't want to have to worry about just completely getting blown by. So you just want to be able to tap it to recover. And as long as you're in that green window and as long as you're facing up, you'll still be able to get the bumps that you want. The same goes for turbo. You don't want to overly rely on turbo because you can run yourself out of the play. A lot of guards are going to use that mentality of, okay, you're trying to catch up. So they're going to wait for you to catch up and then wind up going the opposite way. And that's really an issue when it comes to locks. So you don't want to over rely on turbo. You want to be able to tap them. Also, having the ability to be able to use turbo in certain situations is going to be the difference of you getting that contest and being able to be able to cover the amount of ground that you need. Using both triggers at the same time will help you keep in front laterally. This is going to be huge. Honestly, it's pretty solid this year. However, you're not going to be able to control your angles. So if they kind of wide run you or they wind up shifting back a certain way, you can wind up getting yourself cooked out of a play. That's why we say you just want to tap. Unless they're just sitting there, you're just trying to stay in front of them. You definitely just want to rely on tapping them in whatever situation while just relying on left stick. Up next, on-ball steals. This year in 2K26, timing and ratings matter. You can have a high steal, but if you have poor timing and you're reaching before the ball is fully exposed or switching hands, things like that, you're going to be cooked. You're going to wind up blitzing yourself out of a play and hurting yourself more often than not. You want to make sure you're picking your spots. Yes, high steal is going to help, especially if you start getting to Hall of Fame and legend thresholds. However, you still want to be able to pick your spots correctly. Your best chances to be able to get an on-ball steal is when the ball is dribbled in front of you, the ball is fully exposed, the ball handlers just switched hands. Those are the biggest times. You also don't want to spam square. Please, 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 please do not just spam square X. You don't want to keep reaching. It's going to drain your adrenaline. It's going to give you crappier animations and you're going to rack up fouls. The last thing that you want to do as a lock is rack up fouls early because takeover also matters, but you don't want to put yourself into that bad spot. Up next, we have something else that's very important that's kind of tied into movement, which is angles. Angles are huge when it comes to playing a lockdown defender position in 2K. This year, you want to be able to have good positioning because if you have good positioning and you're using good angles, you're going to get more bump animations, which is going to lead to more fumbles, bump steals, etc. Also, another reason angles are important, especially this year, is because every good bump that you get on a ball handler will also drain their adrenaline. So the same way that you lose attribute ratings, they're going to do the same thing. So when it comes to ball handle, when it comes to shooting, all things like that, they're going to reduce the animations. So as a lock, it's not always about trying to get the stop every single time. Sometimes it's just about getting a couple bumps on them and forcing them to have to give up the ball or forcing them into a bad shot. The less adrenaline they have, the easier it's going to be able to get on-ball steals as well as get bump steals. Speaking of bump steals in this game can be more reliable to a lock than blind reaching, especially against certain dribble animations. If you're bumping up a defender, you already know that they're down a little bit more on their adrenaline and stamina. You recognize certain animations such as like the Kobe White behind the back or something like that. You can just be able to run into the ball handler's way as the animation's playing out and you can bump them out of that animation. They can lose the ball and it can lead to a turnover for you and your team. However, if you press steal in those situations, you're wind up blitzing right through it and it's going to lead to a kickball violation or you're blitzing yourself out of the play. So sometimes it's better not to even press steal whatsoever and just go for the bump. To be a good lock, you also have to be able to know how to properly contest shots. So there are a couple different ways that you can contest shots and there are a couple different factors that matter. So height definitely matters this year. So smaller defenders usually need to be able to jump to get a strong contest, while taller players can more rely on hands-up defense on smaller players. However, depending on where you are in your positioning, you still might have to jump. Unlike last year, hands-up defense it's still effective, but it's not going to lead to the most amount of stops unless you're completely up on them and you see the red icon on that indicator. But even then, we understand how the contest system is in this game. Sometimes it is hit or miss, but you want to make sure you're in proper position. This year, as Beluba talked about, your jump timing is everything. You want to make sure that you're not jumping too late, you're not jumping too early, and you're not falling for pump fakes. You want to make sure that you're jumping at the exact time. So it really comes down to reading the ball handler, recognizing those tendencies, and understanding when they're about to go for that jump. That combined with the positioning for your contest, you want to make sure you're completely in front of them, straight up with hands up or on the jump. So you want to make sure that you're right in the middle, like the red spot on your shading indicator is right in the middle. Contesting from side often triggers the Deadeye badge, which can actually help the shooter by widening their green window. So you definitely want to make sure that you're straight up in front of them in order to be able to get the best contest. Like we said before, badges and attributes such as perimeter defense and your block rating, they're definitely going to matter. So having badges like Pogo Stick and High Flying Denier at higher levels, they're definitely worth it. So if you can get them in your attributes and have them at higher levels, great. If not, there's something I recommend using your Max +1 and Max +2s on. And lastly, when it comes to perimeter defense, we want to talk about screen defense and fighting through screens, screen IQ, whatever you want to call it. You want to make sure you're setting your leverage to your teammates every single play so they know what defensive coverage you're in. So if you say you got your wing, your teammates are going to know that, all right, it's their job to be able to play the middle here. Or your hash is going to know, okay, they have to be able to pinch over or lift over here to be able to help. There's different ways depending on whatever defensive scheme that you want to go. But if you wind up getting clipped by a screen, it's going to be their job to be able to step up and help until you're able to recover. You want to be able to recognize when you should go over and under a screen. If you recognize the ball handler is more likely to shoot off of a screen, you need to be able to fight and go over the screen to make sure that they're not able to shoot that three. However, if you recognize that they're not one of those that are going to completely shoot that ball off the screen and they're more of a rim runner, you can be able to go under. So you can be able to go under the screen and be able to beat them to the spot in order to recover and get back to where you go. It really just depends on the type of player you're playing, and you'll recognize as you kind of play the game and you gain a little bit more experience when you should be able to go over or under. A big thing with that is recognizing when the shooter is actually in a position to score. If you know that they're not in a position to score, they're not completely there, you can be able to go under screens. So especially coming up the court, things like that, you could be able to go under that screen and beat them to the spot because they're not going to be in a position to score. You just have to be able to fight around that. However, if you're clipped on a screen, you need to be able to communicate that. You need to be able to switch or rotate out with the teammate. Those screen animations can be crazy this year, especially if you're not tapping anything whatsoever. You can still get clipped on them. This year, it's changed with screens. Last year, before, if you didn't really move or move the left stick, you wouldn't really get clipped by the screen. However, this year, since that on-ball defensive mechanic is changed, you're going to be sucked into the screen a lot more. So you have to make sure that your screen discipline and your angles when going over and under a screen are a lot more disciplined. You need to be able to use your turbo to be able to move over the top or under, which is going to give you the better pick dodger animations. But again, if you can avoid them completely, do your best to avoid them. So we talked about perimeter defense. Let's talk about interior defense as a lock. When it comes to interior defense, it kind of comes down to the golden rule, right? Don't leave your feet. The same sort of thing when it comes to perimeter defense. You want to be very smart when you're going for jumps. A lot of times you don't want to leave your feet unless you have to. If you jump too much, it's going to kill the positioning that you have, and it's also going to drain adrenaline. If you have a higher interior and block, as well as if you're taller with like higher wingspan, you can just use hands up defense. Hands up defense is still a great method to be able to get stops within the paint without giving up your positioning. If you're close enough to them and you have a good block as well as your interior rating, especially if you're on the taller side, all you have to do is hold the stick up. You can be able to put both hands up and you can get a good contest. It's really all about your positioning. If you're able to get that contest, you're going to help be able to box out or be able to get the rebound. It's something that's very necessary. Now, there's going to be times that you have to jump, especially this year with some of these bigger builds, as well as a lot of these guards with high driving dunk. You need to know when to jump. You want to be able to read their tendencies and their body cues. You know, some people say like if you're recognizing when their knees are loading up, you know, me, I'm reading the floor and recognizing the different launch spots, knowing some of the different dunk animations, knowing where they could be able to launch out of to be able to get those dunks. You want to be able to jump decisively. That is the biggest thing. The only time you want to be able to jump early is if you're running to be able to cut off a ball handler who's getting a full head of steam driving to the paint, because you want to do your best to be able to take them out of that dunk animation as soon as possible. And lastly, chase down blocks. Chase down blocks are actually really good this year, especially if you're a build with higher speed and you have higher vertical. High Flying Denier is a very, very important badge, not only when it comes to closing out on shots on the perimeter, but also when you're trying to chase down a ball handler from behind or from a different sort of angle. You can be able to get great leaping animations there. The key with this though is your timing. Timing is everything. You want to make sure that you're jumping at the perfect spot to be able to take them out of that animation. You also want to be able to play with IQ. If you know a driver is always going to go up, you can commit to the chase down. If you know that they're going to drive and they're looking to pump fake, you have to keep that in your mind. You have to be able to remind that, because otherwise you're going to go flying out the play and then they're just going to go right back up. You're giving up points anyway. Chase down blocks are big moments. Not only can they give a momentum swing on the game, it can give your team energy as well as give you a little bit of takeover, but we're not always trying to go for that home run play. If you wind up getting the block, make sure that your team is ready to play it, because we understand how this game is. The ball might go wherever else. Most of the time it winds up going back to the offense. You still want to be able to be in a good position to be able to get a stop if your team doesn't secure the ball off the block. All right, we've already been throwing a lot of information at y'all already, and we're not even halfway done with this video. So if you like this video so far, please make sure you drop a like, a follow, sub up to the channel, follow us on all socials, and send this to somebody who needs it, because I promise if they could get through it, they would become a by far better player and a better lockdown on 2K26. All right, so we talked about perimeter defense, we talked about interior defense. Let's go a little bit into pressing. Pressing this year in 2K26 is a little hit or miss. The objective of pressing is to make the PG's life miserable from the inbound to the half court. So we want to be able to use body bumps, sideline pressure, forcing the ball, switching hands, forcing out of bounds, forcing the scary, all different types of stuff like that in order to cause havoc. You don't always have to get a turnover on the press. You're not always going to get a turnover off the press, especially this year. You want to be able to take away the hidden wins. You want to be able to drain some of the point guard stamina and adrenaline before they're even able to get set up in their half court set. You want to be able to force them to a particular side of the floor. So if you want to be able to set your defense up on a certain side, also if you want to speed them up, that's a big part about pressing. But pressing does come with its risk. If you get beat because you're pressing up way too high and you wind up getting blown by, your team is going to be down numbers. It's going to have to force one of your teammates to have to step up and play a different position. Somebody have to move over until you're able to rotate. So you're really messing up your defense. So you want to be very smart when you press, or if you wind up getting beat, communicate to one of your teammates that you're beat so they can be able to show for you until you're able to get back. This year especially though, I'm not pressing 94 feet. If I'm pressing up 94 feet, I'm usually having another player do that for me, because the way lightning launch and certain things are, you might get completely blown by. This year I would recommend setting your press up a little bit further back, probably at the 3-point line. If you're faster or you're trying to go for a particular style of press, if you're more advanced, you can maybe go at the free throw line. But even if you want to be able to play back at half court, meet them at half court, that's a great way, because you could be able to funnel them. You can go for scary bumps. You can be able to force an on-ball menace bump. They're all different types of presses, styles, techniques, movements, reasons. I could make a whole video on pressing. So if y'all want that, again, throw that in the comments. We got y'all. All right, so the next few tips about playing lockdown defender have nothing to do with gameplay per se. However, these are extremely important, and this is what separates the good lockdown defenders from the elite lockdown defenders. First, we're going to start with reading the floor. Reading the floor is huge when it comes to playing lock. You want to be able to read and retain information as much as possible. This starts from the beginning. Once the ball is inbounded, you want to recognize which side of the court the point guard likes to go to. You want to recognize what kind of dribble moves that they have used, what kind of combos they like. Most guards have a few types of combos that they really love to use, and they'll kind of keep going back and forth to. You want to make sure you kind of recognize what their favorite side of the floor is, what their shot types are, if they love to fade, if they don't like to fade. You want to be able to absorb all of that information. Give yourself that first quarter, maybe even half, to be able to absorb all of that. I would recommend allowing the guard to do what they want to do, because guards are going to just try and get to their spots, do their things. They're just going to let you get all the information that you want about how to beat them if you let them. So don't try and do too much. Just play solid defense. You just want to absorb as much knowledge as possible. Some advanced stuff I want y'all to recognize and pay attention to as well. Are they lefties, righties? That's going to adjust the different types of fades that they have. You want to be able to pay attention to see if they're a rim runner. You want to see if they're more of a mid hunter, if they like to be able to shoot off the screens, if they like to be able to call off balls, if they're looking for pass backs right after they pass the ball. Are they a guard that likes to force resets? All of these different things are going to be very integral to playing lockdown defender. You being able to absorb that knowledge is going to be the difference of you being able to steal a couple possessions. And in this 2K, which is one of the most offensive 2Ks of all times, any possessions that you can steal can be the difference between your team winning and your team losing. Remember, guards are creatures of habit. And lastly, when it comes to reading the floor, that doesn't just mean watching you and your matchup. You as a lockdown defender, you're a captain of that defense. So you need to be paying attention to the entire floor, the entire game, not just the guard. You need to be recognizing what potential offensive setup that the other team is setting up in as they're coming up the court. You need to be paying attention to, okay, if they're 5 out, if they're PNR, whatever different type of situation that they want to run into. So you can be able to communicate what kind of defense your team needs to use to be able to counter that. Between you and your power forward, you two should be the main captains of the defense, communicating what you should be seeing. You're able to see the higher up part. They're able to see more of the back end part. It just makes it a lot easier. Of course, your teammates can give you more information, but you want to be able to read the floor with everything. And it really just comes down to reading the floor and helping the helper. And being that leader, being that captain, it also goes to this next tip, which is your communication in game. You have to be prime on your callouts. You need to be able to communicate your leverage on screens so you know what defense you're setting up in. You need to be able to communicate if you're over screens, if you're getting clipped by screens. You need to be able to communicate to your hash if you're following wraps, if you're switching wraps, if you're zoning wraps. All of this stuff has to be done early in possession so your teammates have enough time to be able to react and respond. And especially if you play in Discord or other sort of voice channels like that, you have to account for any sort of delay. So you have to communicate all of this stuff as early as possible. Another thing about communication is you got to take accountability too. Communicate. Yo, I gave that up. That was me. Oh, I messed up. Anything like that matters. If you're making excuses the entire time, your team is getting frustrated. They understand that this is a hard 2K to play defense in. It's a team game. But if you're more willing to be like, that's on me, my hands up, anything like that, they're going to be more accepting of those mistakes. You play lock, bro. Like in an offensive 2K, you're going to give up points. You're going to make mistakes. There's a lot of possessions. But the easier you are with accountability, it's going to make it a lot easier, especially as a captain of your defense. Another thing about in-game communication is being open to adjustments from your teammates. If it means moving you off ball, if that helps the team, so be it. You can play off ball. You can be able to position yourself to be able to go for more lane steals. Honestly, playing off ball as a lock, that unlocks a completely different sort of defense and aggressiveness that your team can be able to run due to the amount of space that you can cover on your own compared to some of the other players. So be open to it. At the end of the day, it's not about, oh, well, I held the point guard to this. No, it's all about, okay, we won the game. That's the most important thing. And then lastly, team communication. You're talking, you need to make sure that your entire team's talking. Of course, not flooding the comms, just like on the offensive end, but you need to be able to decide your press coverage before the play. You need to make sure that your lock and back end are in sync in the pick and roll. You need to make sure that everybody's committing to a defensive identity and communicating if you're getting to a certain spot, doing stuff like that. So it really starts with you. So you really want to be communicating nonstop. When it comes to defense, you want to communicate all of this. Not fake comms, not like I'm good, anything like that. No, you need to communicate. I'm over the screen. Watch for this. High-low this when this goes. Rotate off slip. Bait the drop. There's so many different calls, but as long as you're communicating and your team knows, it's going to make your defense so much better in this game. And then lastly, we're going to get into mindset. You have to have a solid mindset when it comes to playing lock this year, man. I can't say it enough. First and foremost, you need to do your job. If you wind up boxing a point guard the entire possession and they wind up making a pass and somebody else scores, yeah, you could be a little upset because you definitely worked for that. However, you did your job. That's what you need to keep in mind. Every single play, okay, I'm doing my job on defense. I am communicating. I'm playing my role. I'm not trying to do too much. Another big thing is don't judge yourself on how many steals you get. Value the stops, the forced bad shots. Box scores are subjective, man. If people are just going off a box score, that means they're not really watching the game. They really don't care, and they really don't know what they're talking about. Especially when it comes to lock, you're not going to have a lot of stats a good amount of time. So you need to be able to focus on the things that matters. A lot of elite defense doesn't show up on stats. You're not going to see, oh, how many times you got a good contest, how many times you had to fill and rotate, how many times you had to do that. None of that stuff matters. So we don't really care about them. If people ever try and question how good you are, just tell them to watch the film. Also, don't worry about perfection. You're not going to shut out scores completely. You're not going to grade out every single point guard. Yeah, it might be cool, but we don't want to focus on that. You want to focus on taking away what they do best and forcing them into the least efficient looks as possible. And then lastly, this year as a lock, it's a team game, man. It's not all on you. If you're playing with randoms or you're playing solo, that's cool. You have to understand that. You can try and get the best of them, but you have to be able to adjust yourself accordingly. You can use IQ only to a certain amount, but you just got to live with certain things. But there you have it. Some tips to help you become a better lockdown defender. Now, this is just 101. If y'all really want to start getting into the real nitty gritty stuff about how to become a better defender, or, just becoming a better lock in general, just let us know in the comments. If you want to learn how to become a better back end, a better shooting guard, a better point guard, a better center, all of that stuff, we can make videos just like this for that. You just have to let us know. Again, we want to be able to give our knowledge to you all. But if you don't want to wait that long and you want to be able to watch some other great 2KFR content, you can be able to click the link on the screen here.